And once I started to let go of this black and white world, right and wrong, this binary world, and just started to be curious and wonder about things and have ideas about them, but no longer really, I try to be very careful about using the word belief, because that, in my experience, ends all my learning. I just have an idea. That's what I believe. And now, fuck, I got to go defend it.
Yeah.
And so, but what you were talking about, I'd love you to talk a little bit more about that, because I think it would be very valuable for people listening to like what that looks like. Because we're told in so many ways that we're supposed to have an opinion. And that's like, for men, fucking, you're a strong man, you have your convictions, and you back those up with solid arguments, and it's all bullshit, in my opinion. There's a little bit of truth and a little bit of false, or there's some combination of both in everything. And I think that was a new concept for me. And when I finally started to embody that, fuck, was that liberating. And so I'd love for you to just talk a little bit more about that.
Sure. Oh, sure. My pleasure. It's one of my favorite topics. It's really, we all have this impression of reality, right? And that includes our belief systems and the way that we see everything, And it's not until you kind of, we were talking before we started recording, a lot of times a traumatic intervention in someone's life will wake them up to the fact that you need something to pop you out of your program.
Just for context, give people what we were talking about.
Oh yes, we're talking about your experience in Las Vegas with the Vegas shooting,
which I think a lot of you, if you've listened to this podcast before, have heard me talk about it, but I've never ever heard it talked about in the context that Cory's about to
yeah.
So if you haven't heard about it, we're not going to get into it today, but it's on the solo cast.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, we're talking essentially about the fact that you had, one program that you were running, one way of seeing the world, a binary, this is A type of reality. And that you were, a part of that shooting, not part of it. That doesn't sound good. You were present for that shooting.
Sure.
And, then, afterwards you were trying to integrate, the feelings and all of the kind of emotional and physical fallout that you had from that experience, rightfully so, very traumatic, glad you're okay. And that you were kind of trying to understand why you had this shift in the way that you saw the world. And what I was suggesting was that, we tend to intellectualize or stay in our upper brain, our frontal brain for most of our lives, and what can happen through a traumatic intervention, an event like that, the death of a close loved one, losing, a profession change, you get fired at your job, or someone that takes psychedelics or goes to a silent retreat or whatever, something like that.
How about all those things?
Yeah, all those things. Yeah. Yeah, all of them at once. And what happens is that it changes the human psychology in a very unique way, because what has to happen is that your lower brain, your archaic brain, has to become jolted in a way where you have a physical kind of body reaction to where, in your case, you're at this place, there's an imminent threat, a possible serious threat of being killed, and you have zero control. And in that space, your body, partly as a protection mechanism, but also as a part of being able to just continue processing, it has to release control in the situation as an individual, because you were forced into becoming a part of this collective hive experience. And in that moment, it's that's your lower brain, your monkey brain going, your amygdala and all that stuff getting short-circuited and having this schism where holy shit, I am not in control. And, then you mentioned kind of having this almost a feeling of acceptance around that, and
like a surrender, for sure.
Yeah, the surrender. And that's often something like that is what happens to kind of hijack or really destabilize the intellectual ego story. And so for you, that seemed to be an oddly transcendent experience, in the afterglow of that experience, because it was something that was unexpected, that was beyond anything you could control, and it pushes you out of this paradigm of the way that you saw reality. And that, cracking the egg thing, after you were out of that, now you're out of this intense situation that you were in, you're back to safety, but you're left with the destabilization. So now then it sounds like to me, what I'm hearing, from what you told me was that you then begin this path to understand to integrate that destabilization. But the beautiful thing about those experiences, or just any type of destabilizing experience or consciousness amplifying experience, is that with all things in life, once you know, you cannot unknow. Once you see over the horizon, you can't not know what was over there. And so now you're left with all of this the light of your consciousness was focused white hot on, your professional life and all these, your identity and all these things. This event happens, it expanded that and pushed that further out. And you're left to try and grapple with that new area in your, the flashlight of your awareness. What is this? Who am I? What am I feeling? Why am I? What should I do? What is my real purpose? And that is a useful, if it can go a lot of directions, of course, of how one responds to an event like that. Mm-hmm. And it sounds to me like you've taken it to a very healthy place, Mm-hmm. But to track it all back to the beginning of kind of where this, where we bifurcated what we were talking about before is, that, we all, hopefully, people will have an experience in their life where they begin to realize that what they see as what isn't, it just isn't, Mm-hmm. It's just this idea of what life is and what, your values, your belief system, your way of intellectualizing and viewing the world. And it becomes this thing where you mentioned politicians and people who are extremely religious, or just really most people in general. It's biological in a sense that the way that we see the world, this kind of map of our, self and our identity that I talked about earlier, that is so ingrained and wrapped around our ego and how we think of ourselves, right? So how as people do we know what we are? Well, we go out into the world, we experience things, we absorb these fragments of different things, and we create this narrative story that we tell ourselves of who we are, what our life is like, what we should do next. And that story is on a very deep level what we look at as like, that is us, that is what we are as a being. And whenever that thing is challenged, and because that's a story, it's just a narrative, whenever that thing is challenged by external information, someone else with a conflicting viewpoint, a traumatic experience, whatever, and someone with a different political or religious belief, or even something small, So when you're in traffic and someone cuts you off, this is really going to undercut what I was just saying because it's so fucking silly. But I have this joke in my mind where whenever someone cuts me off in traffic and is like flooring it like a maniac, trying to like cut off 4 people and get on the on-ramp to fly, or they're in line in the grocery store and they're like running past you and cutting you off, I just jokingly assume, I'm like, I hope that they have diarrhea. That's got to be it. That's it. It's not that they're an asshole. It's not that they're blind. They're self-focused. Like, they just got to go. They're flooring it. They're trying to get home. That's what it is, and it makes me laugh.
I love
instead
it.
of getting pissed. But whatever the thing is that you experience like that, whenever there is conflicting information that somehow doesn't align with your own personal narrative, a lot of people get viscerally reactive to it, that you get angry. Look at people in politics, they're just constantly yelling at each other all the time.
Angry, yeah.
And whenever you disagree with someone else, people often get really heated and aggressive. And it's because whenever there is like a part of your subconscious recognizes, like on a logical way, that what the other person telling you is just as a sound type of bit of stance as yours is, but the other elements of the self see that conflicting with the story you tell yourself of who you are. And so that it's as if that conflicting information is literally trying to erase a part of the capital I ego. Because in the story of you, if that is challenged, you don't exist.
We have so much invested in that.
Yeah. And so that's why you see people having these crazy reactions to even their own, whenever someone thinks about something themselves that even doesn't line up with the story they've been telling themselves about themselves for decades, they get angry or they get flustered and shut it down because it's like, oh, well, I'm someone's trying to kill me. I'm trying to kill me. Yeah, I'm erasing the capital I. And so I need to shut it down and to think this one singular way.
Get back on the path.
Yeah.